Powered by Riverside FM.
Colin Cowherd came out a couple of days ago giving his assessment on the NFC North, and he put the Vikings as the worst team in the NFC North. And I've been getting a lot of comments and a lot of emails of people that wanted my opinion on it, wanted me to speak out on it. So I'm a couple of days late, but I guess I'll speak out on it because UP Nation wants me to when it comes to Colin. I love Colin Cowherd. Colin Cowherd is one of my favorite shows to watch, and more times than not, he's had pretty good takes on the Minnesota Vikings. You know, a couple of years ago, he said the Minnesota Vikings would be a surprise team in Kevin O'Connell's first year. He was right about that. He gave the Minnesota Vikings every benefit of the doubt. His second year, even with all the injuries they had, Kirk Cousins blowing his Achilles tendon. And I think last year he was on board with Sam Darnold playing pretty well, and everything that I heard was pretty positive about the Minnesota Vikings. So usually Colin Cowherd is on the side of the Minnesota Vikings in terms of positivity. This is really one of the few times where he's gone all in and said that he thinks the Minnesota Vikings will come in last in the NFC North and that they have the worst roster in the NFC North. And here's what I like to say to Minnesota Viking fans, UP Nation fans, Skull Nation fans. When it comes to these national media guys, whether it's First Take, First Things First, Nick Wright, Colin Cowherd, Stephen A. Smith, all of these guys, a lot of the stuff I really don't take as food for thought. I mean, it's their takes. They're on a platform nationally, which kind of brainwashes you into thinking that they always know what they're talking about. But you have to understand, as Minnesota Viking fans, a guy like Colin, who has a very entertaining show, very insightful, his knowledge about the Minnesota Vikings doesn't have any depth to it, doesn't have any foundation to it. These guys cover everybody from national baseball teams to all the college football teams, all the college men's basketball. They have to be well-rounded so they can give out information and prepare for their shows. Like, if you believe Colin Cowherd plays a lot of attention to the Minnesota Vikings in terms of watching their games from start to finish every Sunday, looking at their practice reports, looking at their training camp reports, just an extensive deep dive into the Minnesota Vikings, you are absolutely mistaken. See, that's why I like to listen to a lot of the local guys. Some of our local content creators, podcasters, whatever titles you want to give them, I look at those guys as guys that have studied the team that we all care so dearly about, and that's the Minnesota Vikings. So you are going to find some guys that don't have that national platform, but maybe a content creator on YouTube or maybe a local beat writer. Those are the guys that I pay attention to because they have a pulse of the team. They invest in the team. They're around the team every day. So to hear a guy like Colin Cowherd come out and say that the Minnesota Vikings are going to be last in the NFC North and that they have the worst roster in the NFC North, like, I just take that with a grain of salt. But I get it. I understand. Like, they're not going to go into depth into this stuff, UP Nation. Like, Colin Cowherd has not done extensive homework into the Minnesota Vikings. Like, he looks at all the big controversial stuff that hits the national markets, JJ McCarthy, Aaron Rodgers, Sam Darnold, stuff like that, free agency, stuff like that. But he's not going to take a deep dive. And so my pushback on Colin Cowherd is this, and here's what you got to understand. When you're looking at the NFC North, you're looking at the Detroit Lions. And regardless of whether or what you think about the Detroit Lions, odds are they're going to be decent to really good next year. I don't think they're going to be bad. I wouldn't pick them to be the worst team in the NFC North. So you know they're going to be good to really good. They've got Jared Goff as quarterback. And I say that the quarterback position now is so important that you have to have a good quarterback to be successful. A mediocre quarterback, you're not going to be as successful. And a bad quarterback, you just have no shot. So he's looking at the four teams. He's looking at the Detroit Lions. Had a really good year last year, year before last. They've got a veteran, Jared Goff, at quarterback, who is pretty good. He's looking at that team as being a team that's going to be in the conversation to win the division. Then you have the Green Bay Packers, who are always around. When have you seen the Green Bay Packers just have a terrible year? Why they get away from having these terrible years? Every team seems to have one of those years here and there. The Packers really seem to not. They've always had the quarterback. They've always had the Brett Favres, the Aaron Rodgers, and now the Jordan Loves. And I know the verdict is still out on Jordan Love, but Jordan Love, for all intents and purposes right now, is a pretty decent quarterback. Whether he'll be great next year, odds are he's not going to be trash. He's going to be pretty good for the Green Bay Packers. And then you got Caleb Williams from the Bears. Caleb Williams from the Bears, the only thing right now that he has over JJ McCarthy is that he got a chance to start for a full year. And now the Chicago Bears are building around him. New offensive linemen, new receivers, new running backs. The defense has always been stout. You could pretty much debate that the Chicago Bears, whether or not they're going to be second or first in the division, they're going to be an improved football team. Whether that shows record-wise or not, they're going to be a pretty good football team. And then you have the Vikings, who have made all of the best preseason moves, not preseason moves, off-season moves in the last couple of weeks. Fixing the trenches, defensive side of the ball, adding a running back. I mean, you name it, the Minnesota Vikings have filled all of their glaring holes. I still think they can work a little bit on the secondary. The secondary is still a little bit thin to me. But for the most part, they've got the draft coming up. They can continue to fill some of these holes, but Kwesi has done a fantastic job for the Minnesota Vikings. You can't argue when you look at the Minnesota Vikings roster that they have the worst roster in the league. Like, I don't understand where that comes from. The part where I think Colin kind of separates the Vikings from everybody else in the league is that you just don't know about quarterback. And the quarterback is the most important position in the league. You've got to get that right. And the Minnesota Vikings have handed the quarterback position over to a 22-year-old young man who didn't practice last year and has no starting NFL experience. That comes into play. Now, I think JJ McCarthy is going to be absolutely fantastic, but I don't know that. I have no proof of that. I have no evidence of that unless I go back to his college days. I don't know how he's going to respond going up against a first-string defense in the NFL. The verdict is still out until we get more evidence. That's just kind of how it works. No matter how much we love JJ McCarthy, that is just common sense. So when you start looking at the teams in the NFC North, it's going to be a tough division. And I think some of these national guys, they got to try to separate teams somehow. And if you don't pay attention to one specific team like the Minnesota Vikings, you don't understand what a good spot we're in with all the additions that we have. If you're not paying attention, that just goes over your head, Colin Cowherd. It just goes over your head. You're not doing a deep dive into the Vikings. You're just on the surface level. And the surface level tells you that we've had some big-name guys leave, and we have a 22-year-old young man at quarterback. So it's very easy to say that the Minnesota Vikings are going to be the worst team in the NFC North. We shall see. Because I'm telling you right now, if JJ McCarthy is who I think he is, and the rookie season that I think he's going to have, I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to be in good shape. And I don't think it's going to be any surprise, UP Nation, where they end up. I'm not talking Super Bowl next year for sure, but I'm talking Super Bowl within the next 3 years and a great showing from JJ McCarthy his rookie year. We're just going to have to wait and see. We're just going to have to wait and see. I love Colin is right, Colin is wrong. His little segment that he has on his show. Well, this time, I think Colin is wrong. But only time will tell, UP Nation. Only time will tell. This has been Unconventional Playbook. Please hit that like and subscribe button. Those that become members of UP Nation will be entered into a drawing to win a Minnesota Vikings Winter Warrior jersey. As always, UP Nation, we will see ya when we see ya.